Configure access. So for the basic configuration of an ASA, what we really need to get on here is going to be an IP address for interface. We are going to enable an HTTP server and allow ASDM access. So let's go through that first and explain how that works. So coming back over here to our command line, we want to have an interface address. So let's just do show run interface. And let's just take a look at the interfaces here. The interfaces would be configured in a similar fashion to that of a Cisco router. So you will be going on to interface, for example, geek 1 by 1/2. You will give it a name. In this case, inside will be automatically taken at security level of 100, and then you're going to give an IP address. In this case, we have given it an IP address of 10.60.0.11, and we give it a 24-bit mask. And we have done the same thing on gig 1/1, which is our outside interface. We named outside, it is automatically taken a security level of 0. And we'll get into security levels in just a little bit. So now we have an IP address here, 2030.113.2, and we give it a subnet mask. Now you're also going to want to do no shutdown on those interfaces, because as you can see, some interfaces that we are not using here, gigabit ethernet 1/4, it is shut down. So these routed interfaces are in shutdown mode by default. We need to do no shutdown to bring them up. So that would be the first thing that we would do. So we would go on and we would give our device perhaps a name and some addressing. So what we might do is get into global configuration mode and do a host name. Let's just call it ASA2 for a moment. You can see all the ASA2 host name appears now. Let's change it back to ASA1. So we are going to want to set the host name. Then we are going to want to go to interface 1/1. Make sure we have interface that designators. That's our outside interface. And you would give it the name and the security level and the IP address, and then no shutdown to bring that interface up. So just reiterating what I already mentioned there, once we got this interface up, we are going to want to enable the devices for connectivity via the ASDM on the Adaptive Security Device Manager. Now the ASDM is going to establish an HTTPS connection to the device. Now HTTPS is not turned on by default. So what we need to do is HTTP server enable, and that even though we give it the HTTP commands, it's enabling the HTTPS server. The next thing what we need to do is tell is that we are going to allow HTTP, and then we are going to allow those connections from. So we could say that IP address of the host that's going to be authorized to access the server is, and then plug in that address. So it might be something like 192.168.100.0, and then we could put a mask. So we could say anybody on the 192.168.100 network who is on the outside interface is allowed to manage the device. Or we could just enable it for anybody on the outside by going HTTP 0 space 0, which is really just a key for any, and then we say outside. Now I just enabled HTTPS management connectivity on the outside interface. If it's not necessarily the brightest idea to do that, but in the lab environment, that's where we are going to be coming in. So on the outside interface, normally what you would do is you would set up an interface for management purpose. Now, if I take a look at show name IF, you can see I got gig 1/1 and gig 1/2. If you do show interfaces, let's see, we have gig 1/1, and let's just scroll quickly through the different interfaces here, and we have 8 interfaces on these devices. But you will notice now I have these interfaces called management one by one. And so really what we would want to do is going to our management interface, give it a name is management. Okay. Uh, Sets the security level by default to 0 for me. I could give it an IP address which might be 192.168.100.1. Don't know, we could say 187 and give it a subnet mask and then do no shout, and now we could be connected to the management network. And then we could go back here and we could add this HTTP 0 management, and it would enable management on that particular interface, and then that could be our out of band management network. Okay, so that would be a better idea than enabling it on the outside interface. Now what we could do is see if you could ping 192.168.100.1, and I don't believe that that physical management network is connected there. So we're going to go ahead and check the cabling on that show interface management 1/1. So right now it's down the cable is not connected. Once we get the cable connected, it will go up and we can now manage on that interface. Since we don't have a cable to connect there, we are going to do a clear configuration interface M1/1, and that will reset the interfaces. Let's do show run interface M1/1. It will reset it back to all the default, shuts it down, takes the name away, takes the IP address away. Okay, so at this point we now have HTTP configured for the outside interface. You will notice it took out the management HTTP statement once we remove that interface, so no longer a valid command. So it's gone, and I am allowing 192.168.1.0 on the inside management. So anyone on the outside, a specific subnet on the inside. And so now we would want to see if we can get our management connection. Now this is Java based client called ASDM. If we do a DAR, we can see we have ASDM 752.bin on flash, and we will load all the fields we need from the binary file or that binary image. So what we'll do is let's go over to Windows device on the inside network. Let's just look at our topology here for a moment. We'll go back to our inside PC on VLAN 10.10.0.10. I believe it says address, and we will see if that guy's got Java installed. We may have to get to the Java, but we can go ahead and try to connect on the inside interface and manage the firewall using ASDM. So let's jump over to the device and we will just open up the Internet Explorer rather than the Edge browser. Going to put in http://192. Actually, that's not the address of the ASA. Let's go look at the address of the ASA real quick. So show interface IP brief. This is little flap. What you would expect on the router. So we are going to look at a brief output, and 1/2 is our inside interface. 10.60.0.11 is where we want to go. So let's go to 10.60.0.11, and it looks like we cannot reach it. Let's see if we can ping it. And we are getting reply from 10.60.0.11. So you might be thinking what's going on here, and maybe you are really caught on it. What I have illustrated for you is that we have locked down our management access to a specific subnet. Now, right now, I happen to be on 10/10 subnet, And my ASA says that on the inside network, only 192.168.1 is allowed to manage it. So you have got to be cautious of what subnet are allowed. We could do 10.10.0.0 inside, and now if we come on back over here to our browser, we should be able to now hit that, and we do. Okay, so for the next thing, what we will need to do is accept the security certificate warning, and we are going to do that simply because we know that it's a self-signed certificate. We know that we are going to the right device, and we know that we haven't installed any certificate. So it's using just the default self-signed certificate that it created when we booted it up, and so that's okay to get this. Under normal circumstances, we want to correct this. We want to install the certificate that is trusted, but in this case, we'll take it. So let's install ASDM, and it says a server is asking me for authentication. And right now, I don't really have any authentication here to use. So what would happen if I hit OK? Well, it says OK. Do you want to save the launcher? And I will say, yeah, go ahead and save it. It's running a security scan on it. Once that security scan is done, I'll go ahead and install it by clicking run. Here we have the problem. Hold on a second. You don't have a Java installed. So again, it's got some requirement. We can't finish that installation because Java isn't installed. And like I said, we'll have to go back out, and let's just go to a new tab, and we'll go to java.com, and we can do a free Java download there. Okay, it looks like the Java finished installing. Let's here we here we go. No, it's not. We're not going to update our browser settings and set Yahoo is our homepage. Don't care to do that. We'll say next, and now we'll let the Java install. Okay, we have successfully installed Java. Let's open up our folder here. We can do the verification, but really what I want to do is go onto my downloads and have the DM launcher, which is my device manager launcher. And at this point, it should detect that we have Java. So it will install ASDM for us. So it's asking if I want to run the Java application. I'll say run it. That actually the Java browser that I had clicked on before. And I'm just going to close that window out. And in the background here, we can see ASDM has successfully installed. So we'll hit finish, and we'll close all the tabs here and close this. And we are left with our login into our ASDM interface. Now we have our ASDM launcher installed. Let's go ahead and plug in the 10.60.0.11 address. We don't have a username and password, and we'll click OK. It's asking us if we want to continue. It's looking at the certificate here and it's saying, I don't really trust the cert. I can validate it. We're going to say continue again, same reason that we allowed us to connect to the web page before, because we know that it is and we do trust it. Okay, so when we do a connection, it goes through the software update, and then after that it connects, and so now it's loading up all of our models, and there we are in the ASDM interface. Now in the ASDM interface, couple of things to point out. We are on the home tab. We can go to the configuration tab or the monitoring tab. From the home tab, we have different device dashboard. We can see our firewall dashboard, our ASA firepower status dashboard, which is not really going to give us much of anything because we don't have that set up right now. It actually is telling us that module is in, let's go back over here, 5.4.1, and right now it looks like it's up. application is up. But again, we haven't done any setup on that, so we are going to worry about that for right now. Here's my interfaces inside and outside, and from here we can just kind of do some verification. We can enable logging. It's not turned on here by default. We do have a wizard that we could go through called the startup wizard. This wizard will take us go through the configuration. If you wanted to result the factory default, it will do that for us. If you wanted to modify the existing, it will let us do that as well. I'm going to cancel that and go into the configuration tab under device setup. This is just some of the basic things that we would do to set up our ASA. Things like interface settings. We can go in here and we can give our interface their names, put them into zone, apply a route map, enable them, disable them, define the security level, and give them an address and a mask, and so on. Now, there are certain requirements of my interfaces: an IP address, a name, and a security level. What we want to explain a little bit more about the security levels. And first, I want you to note that right now the security level is 0 for the outside and 100 for the inside. Going to our topology, the outside is an untrusted area. So you could think of the security level as setting the degree of trust you have for the interfaces. So we said that on the outside interface, we have 0 trust. Now the whole inside interface is connected to our network. So we trust that. So we said it is 100. Now the way that this works is traffic from a higher to a lower security level is okay to pass. It will create an entry in the state table and then valid replies can come back. That's not a problem. That would be okay. Now, on the other hand, traffic from lower to higher security level interface is going to be denied. So, this is a security mechanism. It helps us control the directionality of traffic. And if we really did want to have traffic allowed inbound, let's say I don't want to block the traffic, but instead I want to allow that traffic to come on in and get to a web server perhaps. What I need to do is configure an access control list to permit that an inbound traffic. Anytime we have a higher security to a lower, it's going to allow it. Anytime that we have traffic that initiates on a lower security level towards a higher, it's going to deny it. Okay, so that's just brief how these security levels function. And again, this is going to be important as you move throughout your career working with the ASA. It's kind of one of those fundamental aspects that you have to understand. You might ask, what happens if a security level is the same? So let's say I had two interfaces here, and these interfaces are both set to a security level of 0. Well, by default, that traffic will not be allowed. Traffic between interfaces with the same security level is not going to function unless we enable the checkbox that says to enable traffic between two or more interfaces which are configured with the same security level. Now, this is going to enable the same security traffic command. What I do want to show you here is the tool and preferences in the ASDM interfaces. We can tell to the preview command before we send them to the device. I'll say OK there. I have checked that box. I'm going to click apply and now it's going to show me the command same security traffic permit interfaces. That would be the CLI command that we would enter to allow traffic between two interfaces that have the same security level. So what you have seen here is some basics with our ASA, basic setup. The one last thing I would like to mention is that you had this box right out of the box from Cisco. If you had this ASA straight from the factory and you wanted to go through and set it up for the first time, you could type setup and hit enter. But if we do that, it's going to require the management interface to be set up. Earlier, we put a name IF on the management interface. Now we are setting it up. Once we had the management interface configured, we could type the setup command and it will take me through the script and it will do the basic configuration that will enable SDM access for me. In this case, we didn't go through that just because we have already got this setup to some degree, but you have seen that you can do it. In your own lab, I would encourage you to do that. All right. So that's wrap up the section here, basic configuration of the ASA. Summary. Let's summarize what we have seen in this module here. We started out by doing a little bit of platform overview of our ASA, and we talked about the ASA briefly and how it is a virtual machine that can be deployed on hypervisor. We went through many of the features of the ASA. We talked about the application inspection capability. We talked about the fact that it can do IP routing. We also talked about the fact that it supports IPv6, multicast, DHCP, and things along those lines. So a lot of feature capability there. We discussed the router and transparent modes as well as a single and multiple context mode and give some illustration of that. We also discussed high availability, failover and clustering and discussed how those functions individually. We did a little bit of overview of the CLI. We talked about the 5 different modes available to us: raw mode, user, execute, privilege X, global configuration, and then our specific interface configuration modes. And we did a little bit of tour there or talked about some of the basic configuration that you would have to do. So wraps up this module for us. In the next module, we are going to actually start to take this game on networks firewall and set it up so that it allows inbound connectivity using network address translation. And we'll also apply some access control. So we're going to discuss those two features in the next module, real important aspects of firewall technology. So that wraps up the second module. I look forward to having you join me in the next module. Thank you for watching.